Back to the future. Russia at odds with America over US missile plans, and Europe in dispute over everything from Polish sausages to Russian gas. Are East-West relations really heading back to the days of the Cold War? This is Inside Story.
I'm pleased to tell you today that I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes.
Russian-US relations, 1980s style. President Reagan's joke broadcast a sign of the times when two nuclear superpowers faced each other in the Cold War. Now, that was all supposed to be in the past, but this year, Washington and Moscow are experiencing some of the frostiest relations since the collapse of the Soviet Union. I'm Jane Dutton, and this is Inside Story. US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice was playing down talk of a new Cold War in her visit to Moscow this week, but things were bad enough for a planned photo call with Russia's president to be cancelled. At the heart of the dispute, US plans to install a missile defense system in Europe. A defense system, President Putin insists, is a threat to Russia.
They are using the situation to strengthen military bases close to the border of our country. Moreover, they are planning to deploy anti-missile defense elements in the Czech Republic and Poland. Besides, new NATO member states such as Slovakia and the Baltic states, in spite of preliminary agreement with the alliance, have not joined the Treaty on Conventional Forces in Europe, and this creates for us the real danger of unforeseen surprises.
Russia and the United States do not completely see eye to eye on the current plans for missile defense deployments, although we are continuing to talk about it.
Well, defense isn't the only area causing concern. There's profound disagreement, too, over the future of Kosovo, with Russia resisting an American-backed plan to give Kosovo effective independence. Meanwhile, Russia's relations with Europe are also strained. An EU-Russian summit is coming up on Friday in the southern Russian city of Samara. A senior EU official predicts the mood there will be, quote, grumpy. Trade dispute fears over Russia's near monopoly on gas supplies and concerns among new Eastern European Union members that the EU isn't standing up to Russia are all clouding the diplomatic horizon. We'll consider the state of Russian-EU relations a little later, but first to that Rice visit. And I'm joined now from Moscow by Dmitry Suslov, the Deputy Director of Research at the Council for Foreign and Defense Policy. And in our Washington studio is Ariel Cohen, a Senior Research Fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining Inside Story. Mr. Cohen, if this isn't a Cold War, what is it that we're seeing?
We have frictions between what we now recognize as historic Russia, Russia that is apart from the West, that is looking after its own perceived national interests, and that believes in power, really believes in exercising, building, and maximizing its national power.
But it also says it's concerned about this planned missile defense system, considering this sophisticated technology will be on its borders. Isn't that a genuine concern?
No, not at all. Russia pops from time to time different issues with which it's trying to attack the United States. After all, 10 interceptors in Poland can do as much damage to the massive Russian nuclear potential as a mosquito can do on an elephant. Russia has 503 ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, each with between 5 and 10 warheads. Some of them are mobile. We cannot even pin down where they are. These ICBMs, plus Russian submarines, plus Russian bombers, can deliver as many as 5,000 to 10,000 nuclear weapons against the United States, God forbid. And the same with the United States. So 10 interceptors are ridiculous to even worry about, and they are, and America stated it repeatedly, and Russian generals acknowledge that.
Okay, Mr. Suslov, do you think then that this is therefore just pure propaganda for Russia?
No, I don't think so. Of course, deployment of American elements of ABM in Eastern Europe is not a military threat for Russia. And that's why some arguments by some Russian generals that this is directed against Russia is of course false. This is propaganda, but Russian concern about American plans are not propaganda, because these deployments and American plans concerning ABM pose, I think, a political threat for Russia, and a political threat that might destabilize international system in general. What I mean, the strategic relations between Russia and the United States, they rest on parity on strategic level. And they also rest on a conception of mutual vulnerability between Russia and the United States. These two sides have to be vulnerable. And as soon as one of the sides starting to create something that the other side has not, it is very unfavorable and very provocative for the other side. Moreover, I think the more the United States is successful building its ABM system, the less vulnerable the United States becomes from the other countries, from the third countries, not from Russia, of course, but from the other countries. And this gives the United States a great temptation to use force. Because the United States is now with ABM system, will be with the ABM system.
Mr. Cohen, do you believe that the United States is that worried about Russia?
I believe that what we hear from my Russian colleague is very much a previous century thinking. It is obsolete, it's mutually assured destruction. He condemns the United States and his own country, Russia, to live in fear forever, and I do not want to live in fear. I want to be protected from rogue regimes like Iran, from being able to launch a missile against the United States, or from a dictatorship like North Korea to be able to destroy Japan with a nuclear missile.
So how worried then is US about Russia's domestic policies?
The United States hoped, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that Russia will integrate into the West, that Russia will pursue a course of developing democracy and market economy. And we almost succeeded. Boris Yeltsin, with all his deficiencies, tried to build democracy in Russia. The Russian people paid a high price. But in terms of domestic policy today, we see less freedom, less political activity, government control of television. And this is not a direction that the Russian people will benefit from in terms of developing democracy in their country.
Mr. Suslov, are we seeing a return to a one-party state, a democratic backsliding of sorts?
Yes, unfortunately, we have to accept that there is a crucial democratic backslide in Russia, and the political regime is getting more harsh and undemocratic. However, I think that we should also take into consideration that much criticism that we can hear, we in Russia can hear from the West about democracy is directly linked with the other issues on the agenda like energy. And the argument on democracy is linked with the US and European interests on energy and all the other on the other points on our agenda. I would also like to disagree with Mr. Cohen on one particular thing. Yes, I would also love to see Russia and US relations like, let's say, France and US relations. Both countries have nuclear weapons, but not in the conceptual basis of mutually assured destruction. But it requires a total change in both Russian foreign policy and the US foreign policy. I unfortunately think that none of the sides are ready for such a dramatic change. And the recent steps by the United States, the unilateralist agenda that Bush administration and even Clinton administration produced, even anti-Russian steps, they prove that none of the sides is ready, unfortunately, to make this dramatic change.
What do you say to that, Mr. Cohen?
We did have two chances for such a change.
I think that Mr. Suslov is aware, just as I am, that the Russian foreign policy and military elites have not changed since the Soviet Union. The economic elites became market elites. There's not a lot of rule of law, but basically these people understand market economics, and therefore the Russians and the Westerners interact now almost seamlessly in those areas in which private capital is active. This has not happened in the area of foreign policy, and therefore we don't have the same relationship as we do between the United States and France or England or even India, which is a democracy. But in Russia, the old concepts of the two superpower competitions, of United States being the главный противник, Mr. Suslov, the principal adversary, that is still very much in the heads of the generals and senior officials who are formulating Russian foreign policy.
Time for a short break now, but stay with us. When we come back, we'll look at Russia's increasingly tense relations with the European Union.